welcome. I particularly appreciate the young Republicans around the room for giving me an opportunity to come down and talk. I've been in this room a couple of times, and almost every time I think it was at a political event, either when we were looking at returns or plotting our strategy to defeat the spread of socialism across North Carolina, which is a constant battle. And that's what we've tried to do over the last 2 years coming in as a minority. It was a lot of fun to be in the situation where you gotta get mobilized. And on January the 26th last year, that was our first opportunity in 140 years for the General Assembly to actually have conservative leaders decide what we were going to do. And in the Senate, they have an infliction over there that I don't get to enjoy. We don't have a supermajority, so we had the added challenge of figuring out how are we going to go against a governor who's just adopted a scorched earth strategy. She won't work with us on things that even many of her members want us to work on. So how do you also convince Democrats to join with us on what right-minded policy looks like? And one of the things you haven't probably read in the press, but one of the things that I'm most proud of, and I know that there are probably some in the room that say, well, why in the world are you working with the Democrats? Because there are some conservative Democrats that recognize conservative policy and support it. Something I haven't seen in the press once is that we've convinced 1/3 of the 52 Democrats in the minority caucus to join with us on one or more veto overrides against the governor that doesn't know how to run this state. And that, that benefits us, and in some ways, if you go back and look at those veto overrides, they were all good, solid, either business-driven or conservative-oriented policies. So we're convincing people who think they're Democrats to actually vote their conscience and vote in a way that's consistent with conservative ideology. Now going into next year, I do have to tell you, you've got an opportunity, those of you who are in Mecklenburg County or around Mecklenburg County, to make history once again. Because when we get Rob and we get Charlie, I can call you Charlie, Tim. Your son say Charles? All right. But once we get these two gentlemen elected and they come along with the Senate-elect Jeff Tart, Mecklenburg County will have a majority Republican delegation in the history, the first time in the history of North Carolina. That it's within our reach, even with the national convention here, even with the ground game they'll have here. If you go to the victory centers, if you go talk to the candidates, if you talk to the people, how many of y'all done? I know Lindsay's done phone calls. Any of y'all done phone calls on the polling? You talk to these folks, the mood is different. Even in a place like Mecklenburg County, there's a tremendous opportunity for Republicans in Mecklenburg County. And we've just got to seize that opportunity. At the end of that video, it says the future is in our hands. It absolutely is. I believe that, I don't believe that President Obama can win North Carolina. I do believe that Republicans can lose it. We've got to get behind President, and we've got to get behind Governor Romney, and we've got to give them everything we've got to get him elected. The stage is set. We do our part. We get out on the ground. We support the candidates on the ground who are also down ticket, and President Romney will go do us proud in Washington and reverse what has been 4 years of absolutely devastating policies for the United States. In fact, it's not something like that. You know, it's like Facebook. You sometimes post things on Facebook. I wish you had a dislike button. Because you just like the devastating policies that Obama has done on the state. But he has. As a matter of fact, this is a true story. I have my son here, and my daughter, and my wife over here, and my daughter's boyfriend, who's kind of like an adopted son to me, sitting over here. I was having a discussion with my son, who just graduated from American University back in May, cum laude in physics. I'm very proud of him. And he's in town. He's about to go back up. And we were talking about him taking the GRE and potentially going back to graduate school. He's got a major in physics, a minor in mathematics, so he's got options, I guess, to go off into the business world. But I said, son, you really need to take a look at this election, because quite honestly, if President Obama wins again, I think you ought to go back to school, because I think it will be several years before the job market will expand to a point to where you'll have the kinds of opportunities that have existed in the past. I'm telling this truthfully to my son because I believe it. And this is a kid that graduated with a 3.6 average in physics. And I'm saying right now, I'd play the odds and maybe go back to school and just take another pass, or let's at least see what happens in the election, because it's that serious. Our future is in that much of a state of flux right now. And North Carolina has to do its part to push us into the end zone. We also got to get this guy named Pat elected governor. Pat McCrory, and in Mecklenburg County, Pat McCrory, to have been a governor for the length of time that he was is truly extraordinary when you look at the electorate that he had to get to re-elect him. He had to navigate a very complex environment here. He had to make decisions that sometimes I didn't even agree with, but he was a great chief executive in Charlotte. He will be a great chief executive in Raleigh. And quite honestly, I have not had a chief executive to work with for the last 2 years. I mean, it's an empty seat. This lifelong politician is perfectly willing to put politics ahead of the best interest of the citizens of North Carolina. And if you don't believe me, just ask the 18 Democrats that voted with us on veto overrides. I mean, think about that. For her position to be so wrong-minded and so counter to what elected officials want to do in North Carolina, that 18 Democrats are willing to vote against their Democratic governor in a veto override. By the way, that's never happened in any other state at this number. And that's the sort of leadership we're going to get from Dalton. He's a Purdue protege. They've hung out with each other in the Senate. They're like-minded in most of their policies. He's supported most of the veto overrides. So he's already out of touch with a third of his caucus members in the House. We get Pat in there, we'll have a great trio between the House and the Senate and the governor's mansion to do things really, really differently. And you know what? When we have that, you need to hold every single one of us accountable. Because at that point in time, we will have no reason to not move forward on all the things we promised you. We've tried to do our best in this session, and we've made good progress. We did some things. We didn't go to the full extent that I'd like to in some cases. In other areas, we kind of went down a path that I may or may not personally have liked, but that's the political process. But when we have a chief executive, we have a Speaker of the House, and we have a President Pro Tem in the Senate that all have a red jersey on, I expect them to operate and live up to every single promise we've made to you all over the years when we said, when we get to a majority, this is what we'll do. It won't be easy. It won't be done overnight. It's kind of hard. I was telling everybody after 140 years, Republican leaders have a pretty long honey-do list. So we're not going to get them all done in the next long session. And quite honestly, if I have anything to do with it, we won't have a short session in 2014. We'll get back to a citizen legislature where you go in there, you get your job done, and you go home, and you have a governor call you back if you need to come back and take care of business. But we do need your help. How many of you are familiar? I know that Lawrence mentioned the Victory Centers. We've got a Victory Center up in Cornelius at exit 28. I was going to say West Catawba. It's really kind of between 28th and 25. But we've got a Super Saturday on August the 4th. Love to have y'all up there and come and visit. I'm going to be up there. It gives me time to just sit down and talk with people on policy issues. But we've got to start turning out the grassroots folks to help us make the phone calls, plant the signs, do all the other things we have to do, particularly in Mecklenburg County with the grassroots organization that we're going to be up against. So we need the help. And we also need some help in terms of fundraising. There's a lot. Who was it that I was talking to? Was it Mark? We're talking about fundraising. It is tough, and I tell you, it's very, very difficult to ask for money. But what I will tell you is, every Republican person who's on the ticket, it's not about writing a check to them. It's about supporting financially what they represent, and you need to know how much they appreciate, even a little bit. $10, $20, $50. It's just a huge ego, or I should ego builder. Just a morale builder to know that you've got that buy-in and that support. And every little bit helps. We have a judge candidate here. I'm sure that all of them need your help. And if you can't do it with your money, then help it with your mind and your mouth by getting the word out. Going into next year, we're going to be very focused. And we're going to get in and out pretty soon. The last 2 legislative sessions, we've gotten out sooner than any time since 1973. But we've got a lot of work to do. And one thing I would all ask you to consider is make sure you're speaking to your local representatives. Make sure you're reaching out to me. You got problems with something I've done? Let's talk about it. I don't know that I'll necessarily agree with you, but I'm happy to talk about it. And a lot of times we learn things and we make changes. John Torbett's a classic example of somebody that goes out, listens to people, and then forms opinions based on what he's learned, not what he necessarily had preconceived. But we need your help in keeping us honest along the way. Right now, let's just focus on getting elected in November. By the way, I've got a general election challenger. Very happy about that. It's an Occupy Charlotte person. We can't find them right now, but we're trying to track them down. But I do have a general election campaign. I feel reasonably confident that we'll do okay there. I'm spending most of my time trying to raise money and raise support for people like Rob and people like Charles that are going after the House races that we need to keep our majority, grow the majority. Get to know them. Get involved with somebody, please. The day after Election Day. Don't look in the mirror and say, boy, I wish I'd done more than just show up at the YR event. I wish I'd done that one more thing where I could actually look at myself in the mirror and say, I did my part. And if we do that, then we'll be fine in November. And we'll change the course of the history of North Carolina for a decade, because when we win in November, this state will be led by Republicans for the next 10 years, at least, if not for a generation. And a lot of the reason why we're here is because of your help in the past. Everybody says, well, I helped the last time. That was the last time. We need your help again. And I know we can count on it.